And as you know, the healthiest cultures have a level of emotional maturity.
Mm.
And so for any of the listeners who are leaders or running their business, I think the opportunity is to go, where can I up-level myself with my emotional maturity, with my willingness to create safe spaces in the workplace where we can have these robust conversations without taking it personally, without judgment and blame, because that will be the difference. That's where the millennia want to work. That's where people want to be part of those cultures as a generalization.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation. And today, our guest is Bodhi Aldridge. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Lovely to be here.
It's good to have you. Tell me, is there any particular super cool dance moves that you have?
With the hip these days, it's not quite the same as it used to be.
I know what you're saying. You can't, I do wonder what it's going to look like. You know, like you watch those old videos of like old people dancing, and I'm thinking, gosh, when we're old, will we be able to do the dances of our time? Because they were very energetic, weren't they?
That's right, exactly. The 70s for me was, and the 80s. Oh, God.
Okay. So tell us a bit more about you then, when you're not dancing with your dodgy hip.
Yeah, that's right. I do love dancing, actually. Yeah, my journey has been, like a lot of your previous guests, it's one where I've just been committed to being a lifelong learner. I feel for me, through all the bumps and bruises of my biography,
Mm.
what sits behind it was a willingness to keep inquiring, keep leaning in, keep, sitting with teachers. And for me, and it informs a lot of my work, I guess I started to realize through that inquiry that in a lot of ways, leadership, life, is an inside out job. Like I had to do the self inquiry to learn more about myself, to have the influence and impact that I wanted to have with my work, with my family. And I think it's one of the great qualities for so many leaders, including yourself, that lifelong learning.
That makes sense. I really believe that leadership is personal. So it's personal to the person you're leading, and it's personal in the sense of who you are and what you're about. And that
Mm.
makes a lot of sense. So I know one of the things that you focus on is around freedom, and it intrigues me your question about, or your comment about, every business leader that you know is searching for freedom in the wrong place. And I am so super intrigued to know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I started last year. I started my own podcast called True Freedom, which was really a Q&A with one of my clients around this topic. And again, working with leaders and private business owners, and think about it for yourself, Jude. Most people who embark on running their own business, most entrepreneurs, at some level, the studies are clear that most of them are looking for freedom.
Yeah.
And this is the quest that drives a lot of business owners, is if I have a business and I can manage my time, manage my finances, I'm going to experience this thing called freedom. And one of the quotes I hear from so many of my clients is, initially I started running my business and now my business is running me.
Mm-hmm.
And so they soon realized that that wasn't what freedom was. And to dissect it, and, fascinating for the listeners to come up with their own conclusions, for me, when you really inquire into this concept of freedom, true freedom, the two distinctions that I make is, firstly, it's freedom from, and ultimately, I think we're all looking for freedom from suffering. Yeah, this innate experience of suffering. Remember, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Yeah, and again, we can talk more
Stop.
about that.
Unpack that right now. That because I can tell that's a very profound statement you've made there. So let's share that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If you think about the human experience, and as we said at the top, um, the leading a business, leading an organization, it's still a personal experience. And if you think about the human experience and all of the studies, having sat with traditional teachers around the globe and studied contemporary leadership development, we know that in life you're going to experience painful moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be challenges. And, it's not, no one's immune from that. It is part of the journey. Yet what's fascinating is suffering is the meaning we give the painful moment. Suffering is when we resist feeling the feelings, when we judge ourselves or judge others, when we make these mental and emotional constructs about what we're experiencing. And as you know, most successful entrepreneurs have leveraged off the pain, leveraged off the challenging moments. It didn't mean they didn't get stuck. It didn't mean they didn't experience some suffering. But what they realized is their greatest teacher was the failure, was the pain, was the challenge. And that's the difference, Jude, is that some people get stuck in the pain and suffer and hold on and want to play the victim and want to blame and want to judge. Everyone else had it easy but me. As opposed to going, okay, this is part of the human experience. What can I learn from this? What can I grow from this? What can I change from the inside out? Does that give you a simple sense of that statement?
It does, and it makes me think about when I'm working with people, I'm very pragmatic in a way and help people become more pragmatic. So that separation of that emotional helplessness when there are ways that you can move forward, but often people just can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. You say that pragmatism is a strategy, and one of the keys is so when we meet the world every day,
Mm.
the three key ways that we experience the world, that we process the world, we make decisions in the world. One is at a thinking level, our intellectual thinking mind. Another is at an emotional level or a feeling level. And the
Yeah.
third is at an intuitive or a gut level. And so often what happens is that when we come across challenges, when we come across pain, most of us, our thinking mind is in overload. So we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are negative.
Mm.
So we've got this incredible inner critic sabotage. And so what happens is our thinking mind wants to distract us from feeling the feeling. Yeah. And what you resist persists. If you haven't developed the skills to feel your emotions, remember, feelings aren't fact. Emotions are just energy in motion. And mastery, leadership mastery, comes from the ability to feel my feelings, not get stuck in them, not get stuck in the judgment and blame, yet know if I don't acknowledge and feel them, they're going to persist. I'm going to suppress them, repress them. Yeah. And one of the biggest ailments in the Western world is this concept of depression. Yeah. And depression is years and years of repression and suppression of emotion that turns into a biological imbalance that we call depression. And it's often very sensitive people who pick up everything in the workplace, in their family of origin, but haven't been taught how to move the emotion. And so pragmatism is a useful tool. I would say a holistic approach is to notice and move the emotions. And the lessons, Jude, in the context of really being present and going, okay, what could I learn here about myself, about my leadership, about relationships? in my experience, often come from your intuition. Yeah, the studies are clear that the most effective leaders have a daily reflective practice.
Yeah.
If you're not, yeah, if you're not finding time to reflect, now reflection can be contemplation, can be prayer, can be meditation. Essentially, what you're doing is starting to reflect. And when you reflect and still the thinking mind, you start to access your emotions and your intuition, your inner guidance, your inner wisdom. And so when you hit a bump on the road, when you hit a challenge, yeah, and you find time to reflect, your intuition, your inner guidance, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, yeah, you'll start to reveal and access much more of yourself as a leader.
I totally agree with all of that. And I just think that for me, when I'm saying about being pragmatic, it's not a distraction from what it is. So I really feel like you have to feel the emotions, because if you don't feel the emotions, that you just suppress them, and then the world's it's a lot worse. But you don't want to live in that emotion. You want to recognize it. And that's that self-reflection, isn't it? This is what I'm feeling. I need to feel this thing I'm feeling, reflect on that and go, right, now what? So you don't want to spend the next 10 years in that one space of whatever it is, failure or upset or something. You need to be, this happened, now it's time to move forward. But you can't skip that step of feel and reflect,
Yeah.
because that's important. And also, I'm a bit like you, I think, is a bit skeptical about depression. Not that it doesn't exist, because clearly it does exist and clearly
Yep.
it affects people, but I think we are too loose with the term. Like a minor upset, I'm so depressed. And I just think that that negates the real seriousness of depression when we make it
Yep.
frivolous spot any old thing. And it's a bit like, someone dies, a loved one is grief stricken. They're not depressed. They're going through a natural human emotion. They are grief stricken.
Mm.
But we're very quick to go, oh, it's 2 months and you still think about them. Oh, you must be clinically depressed. Let me give you some drugs or something. When in fact, they are grieving. It's almost like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you've ever read the book, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, but
No, I'd never. Yeah, I know
it's
what.
one of the books I
Yeah,
read at school. Oh, it's a really good book. That's so true.
yeah,
Isn't it funny, all these old stuff, you go, oh my gosh, did they have like binoculars into the future? But so the whole idea of Brave New World is succinctly is there's a group of people which are classed as savages, but they're us, they have babies, they live in the world like us, but they're called savages because the other people are all test tube babies, lived in a very ordered world and everything's wonderful. But one of the things that the these other people, the Brave New World people, is they have a drug called Soma. And you take Soma
hmm
and it has no ill effects, but it makes everything perfect. So they never ever feel any pain, or they're never, if anything, they're never discomforted because Soma takes it all away, and they live in a world that's so ordered that they are conditioned to accept where they are. So if you're an alpha, you think it's wonderful being alpha. If you're an epsilon, you think it's wonderful that you're an epsilon. You never have this kind of cognitive dissonance. And then the book's about what happens when the two worlds come together. But that's what makes me think about
yeah,
in the world that we are in now, that it's like we're too frightened to feel pain. We're too frightened to feel failure. We're too frightened. Everything. I don't know whether that's a convergence of the perfect lives you see on social media or something, or the way that AI is curating certain things. We create what we read and we create what we see. And even in the idea when they had like Meta was saying that eventually they can do a thing where the world is augmented with, virtual reality, and we can have lenses on so that we don't see the things we don't want to see. So if there's like a homeless person and you could set your filters that you can just never see that person. Do you know what I mean? So you literally just don't
yeah,
see it. You just so you kind of interact. And I think that's look at me, I feel like I'm on a rant now. But this feels like what you're saying is that we're so quick to move past this stuff. And then if you do that, you can't lead because one, you can't have real empathy for people going through things. And two, who wants to follow this absolute perfect gift of a person?
I'm
Oh,
so glad we've
the word
found,
is so perfect.
yeah, found this thread, because emotions is, it's such a important aspect of leadership and relationship, obviously. And so, yeah, that book you mentioned is a classic example of, and what we see on social media and certainly with some parenting paradigms at the moment. Because if you think about it, Jude, so essentially, um, most of us, often when I work with leaders and leadership teams, I often ask them, so who at university or at school did emotions 101? And most of them go, well, I didn't see that subject. Um, because if you think about it, we're not taught this. And we inherit it from our family of origin, who inherited it from their family of origin, who inherited, I do a lot of work in the UK where you are, and working with male leaders, often, men in their 40s and 50s, their fathers have come back from the war, they've been through depression, and there was such a culture, particularly of men, of repressing your emotions. You can't show your emotions. If you're in the middle of the war, you can't show weakness and vulnerability. And they came back from the war traumatized, but they still couldn't share their feelings. And so this is then that teaching, for a lot of men, and this is through the Anglo world, not just in the UK, is that, you know, we think that some feelings are good and some feelings are bad. And that's the judgment that starts this whole thread that you mentioned. And remember, there's only 4 buckets of emotions you're ever going to experience: mad, sad, glad, and scared. And within these buckets, there's a continuum. So mad as in frustrated, angry, annoyed, right through to rage. Sad as in disappointed, upset, hurt, right through to grief. Glad as in happy, calm, content, right through to bliss. And scared as in anxious, nervous, yet right through to terror. Yet most people have been told they just want the glad bucket. Can you get rid of the others?
Love
Like
that. Give
Soma.
me the
It's
glad
give me the
bucket.
Soma. It's like, it doesn't work that way, listeners. I'm sorry. Yep. Whoever's up there didn't give us emotions just to mess with us. They're part of the relative experience. I cannot know joy unless I've known pain. I cannot know happiness unless I've known sadness. It's the ability to let go of the judgment and realize it's just energy, emotion, energy and motion. It takes 90 seconds to feel a feeling, to your point earlier. You don't have to wallow in it. Yet if you don't move through it, it's going to persist.
I love that. I just thought that's so Keats, isn't it? That you can't feel great joy. You've not felt great sadness because I suppose we need the contrast, right? As human beings.
Yeah, exactly. It's the relativity. And this is the piece that, so in behind every business issue, there is always an emotion that hasn't been shared every time. You think about the leadership teams you work with, and again, if it's useful, I'll dive deeper. So the first distinction, and I think your listeners are a pretty mature audience, is firstly, whenever you look at the external world, yet you get to give it a meaning. Inherently, when you look at the external world, it's meaningless until you give it a meaning through your filters, through your
Hmm.
beliefs, your subconscious, your conscious. Yeah. And the distinction is that no one can make you feel anything. Yeah.
Hmm.
You're giving it a meaning. So, for example, one day you're driving to work, you're running late, you've got an important meeting, someone cuts you off in the traffic. Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel like you want to, you want to take the head off. It's like 2 days later, you get up, you have a nice coffee, do your yoga, you're driving to work, someone cuts you off in the traffic, and it's like, no problems, you go. exactly the same external experience, but totally different internal response. And when people realize no one can make me feel anything, and in the workplace, this is the trick, and you work with leadership teams and empower them with these distinctions, is if no one can make me feel anything and there's safety in the leadership team, then it's okay to share. I'm feeling a bit frustrated. I'm not sure that this strategy is where we want to take the business. Or I'm feeling a bit anxious because I don't think we're looking after our customers as well as we could. But as you know, unless that emotion is shared, people come into meetings and they're resistant or they're combative or they're withholding. The easy example, Jude, is have you ever been into a boardroom where it feels like you cut the air with a knife? You ever had that experience, Jude?
Yeah.
And then as soon as someone shares the truth, as soon as someone shares how they're feeling, what happens to the energy in the boardroom, Jude?
Oh, everything shifts, isn't it? And
Exactly.
you see the empathy come flying out, even in spaces you don't expect.
Exactly. And that's the courage. And as we know, it's not just psychological safety, it's emotional safety. That's why, leadership, vulnerability, you talk about empathy. And this is the key. And for the listeners who are running businesses and leadership roles with leadership teams, and for the practitioners who are listening, I know there's been a lot of work around emotional intelligence, amazing work, yet just watch the tendency to judge good and bad emotion, positive and negative. It's very indoctrinated in our culture. And instead of just acknowledging, I'm feeling frustrated. And let's get on with the meeting.
But
Does that make sense?
it also has a gender tax, right? So if the woman, gender and ethnic tax. So if a black woman is upset, she's angry, I should say. It doesn't matter whether it's justifiable anger. It doesn't matter if the anger is loudly expressed or quietly expressed. It's still often seen as totally unacceptable, totally unprofessional, and maybe a bigger deal than it should be. If a man cries, stereotypically women will be empathetic and men won't be. Men can be angry. Everybody seems to accept that's okay. Fine. Totally fine for the man to be angry and throwing chairs around in the office. It's understandable, So it's interesting it's interesting now, I think, because late millennials, Gen Z, and all aspects of what the young alphas seem to be suggesting to be following suit. So is that no, none of that's except, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay, angry, but not aggressive. So you can be righteously angry and express that, but you can't be physically angry or intimidating. So it's almost like finally all the things that Gen X, early millennials have been teaching their children, they've taken that on board, and then we're all super surprised that they have done that and gone, no, you can't do that. I'm like, why? Why not? We're doing this for years. It's like, because you taught us differently.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's
a good distinction. Yeah, exactly. Because it's okay to feel angry. It's not useful to dump it on somebody. And that's the distinction. Yeah, emotional maturity is I'm feeling angry. It's just I'm angry, but I'm not going to dump it on you. I'm going to leak it on you. I'm not going to blame you. It's I choose to feel angry. Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge it because it's blocking this communication or blocking this meeting. So it is a good distinction because again, most of us it builds up, and then we lose it. We get aggressive.
Let's listen to a quick advert. As a leader, you know that having a strong level of influence is essential to achieving your goals. But how do you know if you're truly making an impact? Take the How Influential Are You scorecard to get a clear picture of your current level of influence and identify areas for improvement. With personalised recommendations and valuable strategies, you'll be able to amplify your influence and make a real difference as a leader. Don't miss this opportunity to improve your leadership skills. Take the scorecard now at amplifyyourinfluence.scoreapp.com. Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious. You know what I'm thinking now? I'm thinking that environment has a big play into this, isn't it? Because whilst you can't stereotypical an entire thousands of people because they're born in a certain time period, although we like doing that, but we know we shouldn't. But you can see how the way young people have been educated into that idea of emotional maturity, but then you can see areas of the world and areas of countries where it's been overridden because of the environment that they're in. And when I say environment, I don't necessarily mean where they live. I mean, like the social media influencers they follow, the films they watch, the things they listen to. Because at the same time, with less emphasis, like more emphasis on learning more, but less emphasis on critical thinking. It's almost like we started off with a template of this is what we think, especially in the West, generically is the right way, as you say, separate the emotion from the physical and all this. And then we overload these experiences onto people, and then it resets. And then people then move into anger more easily, for example.
Yeah, definitely. We think of the cultural norms. What I'm noticing now, and again, for your listeners, the courageous leaders, maverick leaders, who are willing to shift this paradigm, and whatever the innovation, creativity, industry, this ability to really tap into the human experience, particularly the emotional aspect, is what makes the difference. What I'm seeing is, as we go through this shift into a new paradigm, that we know staff retention, staff attraction is driven by the culture. And you work a lot with culture. And as you know, the healthiest cultures have a level of emotional maturity. And so for any of the listeners who are leaders or running their business, I think the opportunity is to go, where can I up-level myself with my emotional maturity, with my willingness to create safe spaces in the workplace where we can have these robust conversations without taking it personally, without judgment and blame, because that will be the difference. That's where the millennia want to work. That's where people want to be part of those cultures as a generalization.
I like that. And to go back to freedom, because as a maverick leader, the idea of freedom is more than compelling.
Yeah.
How can leaders ensure there's freedom for everybody that they're leading?
Yeah, well, the other part of the freedom, so it's freedom from suffering, and it's also freedom is our innate state. If you think about it, and again, obviously there's physical incarceration, etc. But if you come back to it, and Nelson Mandela is an incredible example of, true freedom, the walk for freedom. And anybody who's got children or been around children, you know when a child was born, there's this innocence, there's this love, there's this sense of an essence, and that's in all of us. And when you can tap into that, you can start to feel your innate state is this place of freedom. So just tying that loop, and then coming back to your question, again, so much of it is language and interpretation around this concept of freedom. So how can a leader provide freedom for all? Well, we know that the studies are clear about what engages staff, and the closely linked with this, and there are 5 key things that allow people to really have meaningful work. And one is a sense of autonomy and agency. And so we know that if people are clear on their why, if people have a sense of agency and autonomy, if people have enough challenge, flow states, which I work a lot with, it's not about overwhelm, but it's not about comfort zones. It's enough challenge. if people feel part of a team, a collaborative team, a supportive team, yeah, these are the qualities that create a sense of autonomy, a sense of agency, and a sense of freedom. And so, again, cultivating that in your organisation, yeah, what happens is, you think about it yourself, Jude, you do a lot of work in this space, is if somebody rocks up and they've got these ingredients, inherently they come with a sense of commitment. They come with a sense of loyalty. They come with a sense of, I'm free because I'm not being micromanaged. I'm not being judged and blamed. And I'm also responsible for my output, for my input and output in the organisation. Is that the sort of territory you were thinking? Is that?
Yeah, I am, because it's like, so maverick leadership is an adaptive leadership style. And
Yeah,
one of the reasons it's adaptive because it's contextual. So once you have a set of, I don't know, abiding guidelines of, I guess, as opposed to some raw, hard and fast rules that you would see in other leadership styles, it is looking at the context that it is. And I think in comparison to some other leadership styles, when they talk about leadership, they're talking about the freedom of the leader, but it's almost like divorced from the person that they're leading. And I think if every leader empowers other people to be leaders too, and there's no fear in that. So your freedom from you have freedom because if everybody around you is leaders, then your life's a lot easier, right? So you don't everybody what to do because they
yeah,
know what they need to do
yeah,
because they're leading. So that's great, freedom. But it also means that the other person grows to the best potential they have. And that's again something that I think leaders should be purposeful about. So yeah, it's all
yeah,
about
yeah.
giving agency to other people.
Exactly. And the fundamental, and we've seen it post-COVID, I work with leaders in New York, organisations even in London. And what fascinates me, and this is a generational thing, if you think about the work from home or the work in the office, and we know that basically people want a level of community and connection, and they also want a level of autonomy and agency.
Mm.
And what I notice is the organisations and leaders that don't trust their team, yeah, are the ones that want them all back in the office.
Yeah.
And so this freedom piece is very much linked to trust, and trust. If I trust that this person is going to deliver the outcome aligned with the values of this organisation, it doesn't matter if they work from home. It doesn't matter if they like working at midnight and their friend likes working at 4 a.m. I don't have to micromanage them. I just have to be clear, with my expectation. And so, and I'll talk more about my definition of leadership and how that applies. But does that make some sense, that, that freedom for all piece, and how important trust is in that?
Absolutely. And it's trust that you engender as well as the trust that you give. Because often people will
Yeah.
say, well, trust them when they trust me. And it's like, well, no, you
Yeah,
need to trust
exactly.
them first before they trust you.
Exactly.
So what's your definition of leadership? I'd be interested to know what that is.
Yeah. And just to close the loop on trust, the only thing you have to trust is your intuition, your gut. Yeah. And again, the more present you get. The distinction that I make around leadership and the qualities of leadership. So, simple definition of leadership is influence. Yeah, that's all leadership is. Yeah. And
So I'm only
everybody in
giggling.
the organization.
I'm only giggling
Yeah.
about that is because that's exactly what I say on my stuff and be saying that for years. It's like leadership, because like, from the John Maxwell, that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. That's literally how I've defined leadership since
Yeah.
2005. So I think that's so funny.
Perfect. And everyone in the organization essentially is a leader because everyone's influencing the system.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's formal leadership, informal leadership. The people at the water cooler are influencing just as much as the CEO, just as much as the person on the front desk. But what we know is the two key qualities to effective leadership are connection and direction.
Well, I like that.
That's all people want. That's all people want. If a person feels a connection with their line manager, with their CEO, yeah, and connection comes from being connected with yourself as a leader. And people just say, just give me clear direction, going back to clear expectations, because people say, oh, the goalposts are moving all the time. I'm not sure what you expect of me. So any leader in whatever role your leadership is, if you can cultivate connection with yourself and your team, and be really clear on your direction and the direction and expectations you have of them, yeah, that's how I hold it, Jude, as the real keys.
I like that. And I just think I think obviously we must have the same parentage or something like that, because it's like the same as well. So that's really cool. But what I haven't thought about though is the connection direction. And you can't argue against that. That's absolutely true. It's if there is no connection, there is no leadership. There is there's no influence of that connection. There's manipulation, if you want. You don't
Yeah,
need to be connected to manipulate. That's, manipulation is really easy to do. It's a lazy way of leading, right? It's very easy to do. But when you come to actually influencing people, that nuance, that subtleness is where people can struggle with, because it takes real effort and it takes real care, right?
yeah,
Yeah, in a sense that you have to care. So you have to
yeah,
care about
yeah,
the people that you want to influence. Otherwise, you can't influence them. You can manipulate them, but you can't influence them if you don't care.
yeah, exactly. And you've got to really, look in the mirror and go, be honest with yourself. One of the throwaway lines I often offer, Jude, is busyness is laziness.
Oh, I like that too.
Yeah. Because if you're running the busy model, and think about it, think about leaders and people who run the busy model. It's a badge of honor. We've got to do. We've got to be busy. I'm the last one to leave. That's my leadership style. It's like, well, that's a crock, because if you are willing to get present with yourself, do some reflective practice and connect with yourself, then you'll be able to connect with your team. And as you say, that requires empathy, care, purpose, intention. Yet whatever model you're running in your business, we know multitasking is the least effective way. The neuroscience is clear. Yeah, multitasking is the least effective way to run your day. The busy multitasking, the pings and pongs, the interruptions that happen, the neuroscience, it takes 23 minutes for the brain to reset with one interruption. So if you're a leader who doesn't understand presence, doesn't understand flow states, doesn't understand deep work, doesn't understand connection, it's not good or bad. It just means it's just the least effective way to be a leader.
Yeah, I like that. Now tell me, and I agree, although people just don't seem to believe you, because it appears that you're doing well multitasking, but it's that
Yeah,
it's that the disconnect and reconnect is the problem. But tell me more
yeah,
about the flow state, because it feels like there seems to be a movement from the original definition of flow state to almost a kind of I feel good, so in my flow state.
yeah. It's interesting. So flow state is a label, and we know that it's been identified in sports performance in the last 20 years. Yet traditional cultures, knew this was available. Having sat with Aboriginal healers, Native American cultures. And so flow state, and I'll link it to the current conversation. Flow essentially is presence in action.
Oh, I like that. Oh, she's come up with so
Yeah.
many things. I'm just like, oh, I like that.
I know. I should write another book.
You should.
That's it. Please feel free to use them. Um, so if you think about presence in action, embodied presence in action, now what's happened, two things, as you mentioned, is that where most of the flow state studies have been done by men, and they've all been about high performance.
Oh.
And
Mm.
so what they've done is taken flow into hyper focus. Yeah. And again, if you think about, all the books are about being in the zone, being, super focused at work, it's one part of the puzzle, yet it's not the whole puzzle. And I'll ask you what you meant around flow states and being happy, just so I'm clear on what your question is. Yet, flow state isn't about just being hyper focused. And if you think about presence and embodied presence, there's a slight nuance. Presence is a simultaneous, attuned awareness. What that means is that you're present with yourself, you're present with the relational field, you're present with the team. Yeah. And flow comes from that presence. Again, it's presence in action. So it's not just the hyper focus, which people think. You can be in flow state. Traditional cultures knew this. Qigong, yoga, Tai Chi, all of those teach you how to access flow. And for another podcast, I can talk to you about the masculine and feminine energy, which isn't gender based, but which drives this. So when you talk about flow, about making people happy, I just wasn't 100% sure what you meant by that, Jude.
Well, if you think about flow state, how you described it as,
Yep.
for me, almost as like being at one. It's like it's almost
Yep.
like you're hyper aware of, well, not even hyper aware. You're just at one with everything in that action
Yep.
space. So whereas a bit like what we talked about, depression being undervalued because it's been used so flippantly, being in flow has seemed to come to meaning I'm really happy with where I am right now. I'm in flow, as opposed to I am in that where everything is going well because I'm super in. It's almost like I'm doing the thing that I'm in flow with, but I'm not consciously aware of the thing. So that whether that's the perfect throw, the perfect jump, the being able to
Yep.
get that thing done, it's not a state of. In fact, it's almost like an absence of emotion in a way because you're not consciously. For me, when you're in flow, you're not consciously aware. You only know you're in flow after you're not in flow, and then you go, "Oh, I was in flow." Do you know what I mean? But in that moment, you don't know you're in flow because you're actually in flow, I guess.
Yeah. I guess there's a couple of distinctions. And so one of the distinctions is to know that every time you leave home every morning, there are two trains that leave your home, Jude. Yeah. One is the resistance train and the other is the flow train. And the more self-aware you get, you realize, where am I resisting life? Yeah. Where am I resisting at a thinking level, at a feeling level, resisting relationships? Where am I bumping up against stuff? Yeah. And this is the push energy. The journey for most entrepreneurs I work with is, how do I move from hustle to flow? Yeah. All the hustle is resistance, it's push, it's manipulation, it's outcome driven, it's do. Again, nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just the old model. And so when you learn how to get present and access flow, then your life has so much less resistance. And as you say, there are times when you're totally immersed in a task, in a project, where it's like an absence of resistance, an absence of any thinking mind. It's just intuitive. And again, that definition, which is part of it, is very much this comes from the sporting world of being in the zone. You listen to Michael Jordan, they say, I wasn't thinking about the pass, I just knew to throw the pass. And again, this is when we talked earlier about thinking, feeling, and intuition. Flow is where innovation occurs, intuition lives, presence lives. True creativity only comes from being present in the moment. And that's what we cultivate. That's what these practices cultivate, because that's where the superpowers are. That's where you can achieve, experience, so much more. And that's the dance, because most of us are in resistance. We're, again, those 60,000 thoughts a day. The Hindu saying is, your thinking mind is a fantastic servant. It's a terrible master. And so most people I work with have to slow down that busy mind. It's a very fast train. You want to slow a train down. You don't jump in front of it. You start to cultivate reflection, contemplation, prayer, meditation, nature. You've got to slow that train down. You start getting more present. Notice these emotions which trip you up, and then start to get present, flow, intuition, innovation, creativity.
You know what? I love talking to you because it makes my brain go in all in different places. But when you was talking, it made me think about work, as in working in an office or, what you get paid to do as opposed to entrepreneurial stuff. And I just think nobody really talks about being in flow when you're in the office.
Mm.
And people, and being in flow is often a singular activity. So, like, you may be in the office doing your thing and you can be in flow, and then someone comes up and talk to you, and then you're out of flow for the rest of the day, for example. It's been it's been very few. I've been on a couple of senior leadership teams that when we've got together, the whole team was at flow at the same time. It was an amazing, joyous time where actually as a team, when you were together, you were more productive because it was so easy. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like you had to
Yep, yep.
consciously do anything. It was effortless. We all came for a purpose to do a thing, and we left with that thing done. And it was a beautiful thing to, like it's a beautiful thing to see, this kind of
Mm.
flow state. But talking to you now, I'm thinking how rare actually that is,
Yeah,
which is rubbish.
yeah,
We should sort
without
that
that
out.
awareness. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, it's not, none of this is rocket science. We know this intuitively. Again, it's just awareness and implementation.
There's trust, right? So
Mm.
so
Yeah,
in the teams that I've been in where that has been the case, the highest thing was there was every single member of that team trusted every single member of that team, not just to do what they say they were going to do or they would do, they'd manage their own teams really well, but that everybody had everybody. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so there was no,
yeah,
when we got together, there was no competition. There was no, I'm going to keep this behind because then I'm going to look better than that person. Or people would be genuinely working for the betterment of the next person, even though that next person was running a team that's completely different to yours and a different function. And that's quite
yeah,
rare, isn't it? It's possible, but when I'm thinking now at teams that I've seen work really well or I've helped work really well, it's when the level of trust has expanded beyond the team to the point like the the teams that you're managing are now trusting the teams that your colleague is trusting because you have that high trust, it's extended. I mean, I remember working
yeah,
in an organization where my equivalent on the line, so I was in HR, we had such a trust level that if the other was away, we would deputize for them. So even though like they're
mm,
in ops, I'm in HR, and it would be like, so, and we'd have managers underneath us. It would be like, if you need to have a senior level, someone has to agree from a senior level, go to that person and take it. And whatever they say, trust it. I trust them so much
yeah,
that whatever they say is the thing you should do is the thing you should do. And that's quite rare, isn't it, that you can do that cross functionally.
yeah, yeah. It's a good example, and to follow your comments. So the thing with team. So one example is if you think about a flock of starlings in the UK, you see
Mm.
that incredible footage. They're all moving in synchronicity.
Oh,
Yeah, they're all moving as one. And if you look, we're doing this interview with the Paris Olympics on. If you look at the British rowing team, they have to trust each other. The rowing fours have to be in sync with each other. Yeah, the sum of the four is way beyond the sum of the individual. And so these concepts aren't new to us, and again, when teams are clear on their purpose, when there is this level of trust, and there's lots of studies around how do we create trust. By the way, the fastest way to create trust is vulnerability, just to put that in there.
I would
I
just
agree
taper that
exactly.
with appropriate vulnerability. I would just taper that.
Well, yeah, and again with the thin slice, yeah, a lot of people think vulnerability is, I ran over the dog, I've divorced from my husband. It's like, no, that's not vulnerability. That's dumping your shit in the tank.
Just making everybody.
Vulnerability is exactly vulnerability is just emotional maturity. It's like, that willingness to. But yeah, there's another podcast. But yeah, I agree absolutely. Like, and it's fascinating because, and this is something, Jude, with your guests and also your listeners. If you look at the way we measure performance in the workplace and we measure outcomes in the workplace, the old model is if I can't measure it, it's not real. Yeah, if it's
Yeah.
not real, I'm not interested. And that reductionist model through the thinking mind, remember we're in thinking overload. Our biggest addiction is to our thinking. You can't shift the paradigm unless you shift that context. And you've got to really shift the context to what actually is productivity, what actually is success, what actually is staff engagement, what actually is, attracting and keeping the right people. Because as much as we can't measure some of these things in the old model, I'm sure as heck any of the businesses you work with know intuitively the cost of recruiting and losing staff because the culture isn't aligned. It's not built on trust. It costs them so much money.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's interesting there is that when everybody's responsible for their own budget, and when you collectively get together, you don't think about our budget. Then when you have losses like that are driven by the people, so a bad culture, toxic manager, whatever, the pain of that isn't felt in an individual's functional budget that often. So therefore it doesn't matter because they would see, so like if they would, a bad manager loses 5 staff, but he brings in X amount of money. So the sales of that department gets money, but the HR department's cost to recruit increases. So the pain sits in HR when the problem's in another area. And that can be the tug of war on so many things. And you see that not just in people, but you see that in marketing and sales, for example, or marketing and ops. So we are going to do a massive campaign. It's going to drive customers here. Great. We don't have a service that's mature enough to accept all of this information because there's a fundamental problem. But that's okay because our sales targets have increased, but operational can't resource it. So they lose X elsewhere, but that's okay. It's like, that's where you see the fault. And often I say that when I go in and talk to senior teams and say, okay, collectively, individually impact is great. Collectively impact is not great. And it's not great because you're not thinking it as a collective. And maybe it's that, and I sort of think it's the understanding that as a senior team, when you come together, you are one entity. You're not 6, you're one. So if this department is feeling the pain, then we are all feeling pain. And I think that's one of the biggest things that costs companies when the exec team are not a true collective. They're all individual spokespeople for their department. And that's where it crumbles. And it almost doesn't matter what you do around the organization if they continue to run an organization where fiefdoms is the best way to get ahead. Bodhi, I think this is a great place to end. Well, actually, it's probably a terrible place to end because we could talk forever, but you'll just have to come back a couple of times. That will probably be the easiest way of dealing with it. But I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, it's been a delight. And yeah, as you say, like we could keep conversing, and I definitely will come back because there's so many threads that you've opened up. Even those last comments, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. There's some shifts there as well. So thank you to the listeners. I think in the show notes there's a free mini course that we offer the listeners. I think it's just www.freeminicourse.com, and my website, Bodhi Aldridge, Aldridge, and the podcast is True Freedom. So, love anyone who's interested in this conversation. Feel free to jump on, and Jude and I will certainly share ideas moving forward.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you out there for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I am Judith Germain, your host, and I hope you enjoyed listening to today's conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.